So today we are talking about data centers. I'm joined by Nick Pavlichek from OneTrust. OneTrust are a leading provider of privacy, security, and governance solutions. Nick, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Johnny.
So Nick, what do we mean by when we say data center? What do we mean?
Yeah, data center, you've seen this kind of shift in the last a decade or so. Data centers are really where a lot of the cloud computing environments live, where your data is being stored, where you talk about SaaS solutions, where those applications are actually being hosted. So they're really just a location, honestly, lots of large warehouses where there's a lot of server equipment and hard drive equipment and network equipment to really help store your data in the cloud and process your data in the cloud for really whatever different means that you have.
And how do they really work? How do data centers work in an IT infrastructure?
Yeah, so as you've seen kind of the world shift to a cloud-based environment, with your data being in the cloud and everything, as you're working on your own devices and you're kind of pinging different servers, a lot of times that's actually pinging to an actual data center. And so your data is being sent there, it's being processed by a server. Maybe your data is being stored on a server, and ultimately being sent back to you. So if you're working on different applications, you're actually working within or pinging an application that's stored in a data center, likely in a cloud. You've seen kind of the industry shift away from privately hosted data centers, on-prem data centers. You've seen it more shift to a cloud-based environment. And that's really where a lot of the application type equipment's being stored, and where a lot of the security type things are being stored as well, which is becoming really more and more critical as we've shifted to a cloud-based environment, and you're likely working with data center providers or cloud providers that aren't within your own network. There's a lot of security ramifications that you need to focus on with the data centers as well. So it's not necessarily just we're using an application that's running off of a cloud server in this data center. You really have to start thinking about what are the security implications to that as well.
Yeah, that's going to be my next question. So what are the key sort of challenges or cautions that businesses should consider when looking to utilize a data center within their infrastructure?
Yeah, so a lot of the challenges you want to look for is, do you have standard security certifications? There's a lot of third-party standards and frameworks out there, ISO, NIST if you're working within the US, SOC 1, SOC 2 type things. And there's, security certifications that go and make sure that the data center you're working with has all of the necessary steps and controls in place to protect your data from different threats and vulnerabilities that could ultimately impact that and result in some negative consequences of a hack, a data breach, someone getting unintended access to data. So there's a lot of really thorough, really advanced certifications out there that help companies manage this. And so when you're working with a data center, choosing a data center provider, you want to first make sure, do you have these certifications? Are you audited by a third party to make sure that you've actually gone through and done these things, and these controls are tested on a periodic basis, and you go through pen tests to make sure that your data center is secure. Other things you look at as privacy starts to become more and more of a driver in the world and more critical is honestly just the geography. Where is that data center located? There's lots of data transfer requirements in where your data is being stored, where it's being sent for processing. Sometimes the locale or where it actually is really critical to legal regulations and compliance. So you need to make sure that, if you're processing data from someone in the EU, that you're sending it to a data center in the EU versus an off or a data center outside of that, and because that just results in additional legal red tape and processes that you need to go to. So there's lots of little things like that you want to look at, but you can actually start to use data center location almost as a key differentiator for your business, because you started to see that shift to data privacy. And if you do have data centers located in the areas in the countries where your customers are working within, if you have those data centers close by to them, it actually sets you up as a step ahead from the competition, because there is less red tape and less compliance things that you need to go through in getting that data center stood up.
Yeah, sure. And on that note, is it typical for companies to have more than one data center in different locations, or would they typically have one?
Yeah, and so that's a great question. So you do generally have more than one data center, and there's really a couple different reasons for that. So one is that last point I brought up of having that geographical presence in different locations to really start to target and help with your customers in different locations of the world. But there's more reason to that than that. You do start to look at disaster recovery and business continuity. And so going kind of back to the security question earlier, the security talk earlier, you really need to make sure that not only are your data centers secure, but if something does happen to that data center, whether it's from a nation state hacker or even just a natural disaster, that you have fail safes in place to ensure that your business is continuing to be able to operate. And so by having geographic redundancy, it helps you mitigate a lot of risk in choosing a data center provider or choosing where your data center is going to be. If something happens, a tornado or a hurricane or a fire happens and brings one data center offline, you need to be able to fail over to a different server in a different location. And that's where geographical redundancy really comes in, to where that disaster that hit, your data center hasn't impacted your secondary data center. And that's still in a geographic location that works for your business.
So basically, they're very key tool to protect data.
Absolutely. Yeah. So really, when you're looking at data centers, it's not just choose one and you're done. It's choose two, sometimes even 3 or 4 different data centers that you can also start to use in targeting where your consumers are, where your customers are, and even start to work in a multiple data center type approach where they're all almost acting as a primary data center versus the primary and backup, where the backup's not actually processing anything live. You're really working on just multiple primary data centers all kind of working in sync.
Fantastic. Well, Nick, some really great tips there. So thank you for joining me. And for more information, we can go to the OneTrust website to find out more.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me today, Johnny. Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching today's video. Be sure to keep following us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube for the daily video updates.